Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. Remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I can think of no reason why the gunpowder treason should never be forgot. Or ever be forgot. I misspoke on that one. Happy Guy Fawkes Day, and for those of you who are watching on the BAM user feed, I've got my Guy Fawkes mask and my V for Vendetta knives here. Unfortunately, I can't really talk into the microphone very clearly with the mask, so I'm going to have to remove it for the rest of the show. We have lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. And a quick reminder, in our third hour today, we'll be talking with Yusuf Rashid, who is trying to crowdfund a GMO-free chain of stores or restaurants, which definitely fits a market need. But obviously is going to draw the ire of those who think you should eat their GMO food and not complain about it whatsoever. Okay, getting into the news here. Have you noticed how heavily the Western media, U.S. and Britain, are still pushing bomb terror regarding the Metrojet crash? And it's becoming a little obvious how heavy-handed it is. And we're still seeing all these stories like over in Business Insider about a bomb was planted by ISIS, likely brought down the plane. And they go in there and say basically the intelligence is based on monitoring of ISIS messages, meaning those videos that came out, 2 of which have already been just dismissed as obvious fakes, and the third was obviously professionally shot. But that's basically what's going on there. They're using rumor and innuendo. In one case, they're saying the timing of this crash with El-Sisi's travels to visit England. Obviously, because of that, we should assume that it's a bomb. And that's what they're doing. They're assuming, and we know what assume means. Now, this isn't reporting. This is a sales pitch. The evidence the West claims to have for a bombing is flimsy in the extreme. This feels like a propaganda campaign. Leading to what? I don't know. Lindsey Graham was out there saying there's a new 9/11 coming. It's coming from Syria, going to get us all angry and say, yes, go into Syria. We don't care if it's a war crime. We don't care if it's a violation of international law and the UN Charter. You go get those gosh darn evil Syrians. David Cameron has waded on in saying that, yes, he absolutely is convinced that this was an act of terror and bombing. And, of course, I'm waiting for the corporate media to denounce David Cameron as one of those wacky tinfoil hat conspiracy kooks making allegations without any proof whatsoever. Now, Russia, trying to be fair and objective, has asked Great Britain for the evidence on which they base their claim that there was a bomb on the Metrojet. Britain is refusing. We don't have to give it to you. Just take our word for it. We know what was really going on. Even though Britain is not on the official investigation, neither is the U.S. It just feels like a propaganda campaign. And if you'll remember, back in August of 2001. The media was saturated with terror, Osama bin Laden, and I wrote at the time, bin Laden hasn't done anything justifying this total media coverage, saturation all over the place. And I actually wrote, I was still writing over at Free Republic, I wrote, this feels like a sales pitch. We're being set up for something really big to happen. Bin Laden's going to get blamed for it, and sure enough, 9/11 came along, and I'm getting that same feeling right now between Ukraine, WikiLeaks saying that McCain was talking about some kind of a false flag, Lindsey Graham out there, they're pushing terror as hard as they can, and it's all for show and propaganda. Remember yesterday, big deal about how Britain is canceling all flights to Sharm el-Sheikh because of the terror threat, which in and of itself was nonsense, because terrorists aren't going to do the same thing in the same place twice. They're going to go someplace else. And not too surprisingly, Great Britain has restarted flights between Britain and Sharm el-Sheikh. They're going to start tomorrow, Friday. Business as usual. Everything, they got their newspaper headline. That's fine. Everybody's going to go on back. Seeing another story over here in Slate, no less. A new, scarier phase in the war against ISIS. And they're out here fanning saying, obviously, ISIS is going to start attacking commercial airliners. Now, if you will remember, it came out that one of the false flags the U.S. was planning was to have multiple bombings on multiple aircraft all on the same day all over the world. And this piece of obvious propaganda from CNN seems to fit in with that. And if you look at it from the U.S. point of view, they've lost the initiative militarily in Syria. They've lost the initiative with the propaganda. Nobody's listening to them anymore. They need something dramatic to reignite the war fever in the American people, to get us all hot and bothered to throw our money at the government and our babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets. A false flag is about all they've got left to play, and I'm concerned that they may be thinking about that. Meanwhile, there's another possibility over at S.J. Lindman Blogspot saying that this is all about finding a reason to start isolating Russia in travel, to basically make people afraid to fly to Russia. Well, that's a little weak because Russia was the destination. The bomb in the airplane never got there. Had there been a bomb, it would have been down in Egypt, not Russia. And again, the official investigation so far is saying, flight recorder shows no impact from the outside. Flight recorder indicates a malfunction in one of the engines. No explosive residue anywhere on the wreckage or the bodies. Egypt, which is part of the official investigation, is saying mechanical fault. Russia, whose aircraft it was, is saying mechanical fault. The only ones screaming terrorist are the Western media and Metrojet itself, which has a financial motive to point the finger at terrorism. Because without an act of terror, they're looking at liability and negligence lawsuits that will finish off an already at the edge of bankrupt company. So that's what's going on. Now then, we are seeing a story over here in Zero Hedge where the CIA and the Saudis are going to be giving the Syrian militants weapons capable of shooting down commercial airliners. Because that was one of the biggest arguments against the initial claim that ISIS shot down the Metrojet over Sinai. They don't have anything that can reach that high. Well, thanks to the CIA, now they do. And so what we have here is the United States is telling you all that terrorists brought down the Metrojet Airbus, and their first move is to send these terrorists man-pad missiles that can kill more passenger jets. Does that make any sense at all, other than building up to a massive new 9/11 false flag to try and get us all hot and bothered to be warriors anymore? We're going to grab a quick phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, that was one of the things they were doing in Benghazi, was running Stinger missiles and SA-7s, SA-9s to, and also shuttling around terrorists into Syria from Benghazi, Libya.
Well, they have to be giving the militants something a little more potent than the Stingers and the SA-7s and 9s, because those won't reach 31,000 feet. They're talking some serious anti-air capability, and they're not really sending them over there to kill commercial jets. They're getting ready to start shooting down Russian warplanes. It's a replay of the Afghanistan tactic.
That's not going to work because the weapons Russia has are more of a tactical, and they got the laser guided now, so that whole play is not going to work. Russia
can just go to standoff launching, and my understanding is that Russia's electronic warfare, electronic sensor defenses can actually confuse these infrared guided missiles with something more sophisticated than flares. We got to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. The latest Associated Press GFK poll is finding that more than 60% of Americans oppose any more military intervention in Syria, ostensibly to target ISIS, let alone regime change a government that has not actually attacked us. Washington, D.C. does not have the support of the American people to go into Syria right now, and that's why I think they're considering some kind of a new dramatic false flag that they're going to blame on Syria or blame on ISIS to try and get us all riled up to go get those gosh darn Arab Muslims. Because, hey, it's worked before so many times, but in the age of the Internet, not as well as it used to. It took almost 30 years after the assassination of John F. Kennedy for half of America to realize the Warren Commission was a cover-up. These days, in the age of the Internet, government lies have the lifespan that can be clocked with an egg timer. Small one, too. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Randy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was just reading an article in Sputnik News talking about that Metro Air did not terminate their maintenance contract with Egypt Air. It says, according to earlier reports.
No, they didn't terminate it. It said it expired. Egypt Air is saying that they kept on servicing the airlines, the aircraft as a courtesy, hoping that there was going to be a new contract awarded, but it never came down. But when you have an airline that can't even pay their own people for 2 months, you know that's an airline that's in serious trouble, and sooner or later, those kind of cash restrictions are going to impact safety. Now, we do know, and again, I still wonder about that rear pressure bulkhead, even though apparently the digital flight recorder is saying one of the engines disintegrated. But we do know it had that tail strike accident a while back. But again, there is no evidence of a bomb or a missile. And the claims made about shrapnel and all the rest of it have already been discredited. The official investigation is saying there's no explosive residue anywhere at this point. There is no foundation for the West to be pounding on the issue of terror and bomb this prematurely. And that's the whole point. They're leaping ahead to sell this idea without a factual foundation for any of it. They're basically saying, oh, we've got this video and the timing and that's it. That's enough for us to just leap forward and conclude it had to be a bomb, because we know that airplanes never, ever fall out of the air just on their own. Of course they do. It does happen. And, again, there was that Japan Airlines flight, that 747, that was brought down when their rear pressure bulkhead blew out. Things happen. These airplanes do, every once in a while, despite the best of intentions, they suffer mechanical failures. We had that plane that caught fire in Florida. Now they've determined that somebody left one of the gas lines unattached.
Yeah, well, I've seen, back when I was in the Navy, I have seen engine just basically, you know what FOD is.
Foreign object damage, yeah.
Yeah, and I've also seen it where the turbine blades have cracked and just completely let the engine out the rear of the plane.
Yeah, and obviously at 31,000 feet we can rule out foreign object damage. It does sound to me like there may have been a rotor burst. Now, I was under the impression that the Airbus engine nacelles had a lining of Kevlar to try and contain damage from an engine. But if the engine literally blew off the pylon and flew backwards, I mean, who knows what's going to happen from all the material coming off of it. Probably would have hit that tail section.
Yep. And hitting it someplace where it had been repaired, that's probably one of the weakest parts.
Well, all we can say right now is we don't have all the answers yet. The official investigation is saying mechanical failing. The Western media does not have any reason to say bomb and terror and ISIS. Therefore, they've got, there's an agenda there.
Yeah, you can see that. It's as obvious as the nose on my face.
Okay, anything else?
No thanks, just keep up the good work.
I will as long as I can. Thank you for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to Rose in Pennsylvania. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. The reason I'm calling, it's my belief that the reason why the West is trying to tag a bomb onto that Russian aircraft, their strategy is that's the reason they're doing that is for the Russian domestic audience. So the people in Russia will think that there's a direct correlation between Putin's intervention in Syria and the downfall of that plane. See, right
they
now
they have been pushing that. The problem with that, of course, is that the act of terror took place in Egypt, not in Russia. But we had Ashton Carter only a few days ago saying
it makes no difference where it was at.
Well, it does to the point of view of somebody who's inside Russia, because it's far more removed.
They don't want their airplanes going down, and if they can hit, they targeted Russian people, and what they're trying to do is sway the Russian audience, because they can't get Putin out of Syria, and the only way they can get him out of Syria is if the domestic audience goes against Putin. That's the strategy.
Well, if it was a strategy, it was poorly thought out, because if Russia were to go along with this idea that this was an ISIS attack on their civilian passenger airliner, that's actually going to motivate the Russian people to say, go on in and finish off ISIS. That's actually going to build support for Putin rather than take it away, and Putin would be justified escalating the situation in Syria and possibly even going into the Sinai as well. So if that was somebody's strategy, it was not well thought out at all.
Well, I don't know how it was thought out, but that's my opinion. They're trying to affect the domestic audience, because they can't get Putin out of Syria under any circumstances unless the Russian people want him out, and that's the only way he's going to get out.
Well, again, look at when they pulled the 9/11 hoax on the American people. Did the American people stand up and say, let's get out of the Middle East? No, they went the other way. Let's go get them.
No, there was 71% of the people said don't go in. If you recall, they didn't want...
No, not go in. You're not listening to me, okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. After 9/11, nobody stood up and said, maybe we should pull out of the Middle East entirely. And, we just... went on in there. Now,
we said we were...
Hey, Rose, my radio show, because we're coming up at a commercial break, I want to remind you that the U.S. government has been making statements that Russia should expect reprisal attacks on their own territory. So I agree with you that is a strategy the U.S. is considering. But at this point, I think the Russian people are going to look at any terror attack happening on their soil as originating with the United States and not with ISIS, especially with the revelations that the U.S. has been supporting and arming and training ISIS as well. We got to take a break for commercials.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to Syria, the big news is the siege of Aleppo has been lifted. Joint operation between the Syrian army and Russian air cover has basically retaken a huge part of Aleppo, 250 square kilometers. The highways are now open and under the control of the Syrian government. At least 60 terrorists killed in the last 48 hours. So that is a major, major victory. ISIS is falling back to another one of their positions. Aleppo was a key city, a key logistical point within Syria, and it's now back under Syrian control. Russian warplanes have carried out 81 sorties and hit 263 targets over the past 48 hours in 8 provinces in Syria. They are really showing that they know how to do this, whereas the United States, claiming to be after ISIS, spent an entire year bombing nothing but grain storage silos, pipelines, and refineries. The U.S. is still trying to convince the American people that the U.S. is relevant. They're trying to act like, the Russia is now part of the American coalition against ISIS, and nothing could be further from the truth. It has gotten so bad over there for the U.S.-sponsored terrorists. Many of the armed opposition factions, the moderate rebels supported by the United States of America, have sent communiques to the Syrian government saying they are ready to discuss a ceasefire. They're ready to call it quit. An aide of top ISIS leader al-Baghdadi was reported killed in Salahuddin. They're doing really, really well. Now, there's an article coming out of Washington's blog. Dear fellow Americans, do you have any idea what's being done in your name in Syria? And I think probably most Americans don't. They're getting their news off the corporate media. Yes, we've got to be in Syria for some reason because ISIS is bad, and we heard something about Assad more and more. But the latest developments are very alarming. The U.S. is now giving their bought and paid for terrorists in Syria missiles that can shoot down passenger jets, and obviously Russian warplanes. The U.S. just deployed a squadron of F-15C air superiority fighters to the Turkish border with Syria. These aircraft are not equipped for ground attack. These aircraft are not set up to go after ISIS or anything on the ground. They lack the internal electronics. They are configured for dogfighting, going up against warplanes. ISIS doesn't have warplanes. So what are these F-15Cs being pre-positioned for? Going after Syria and possibly Russia's warplanes. Now, meanwhile, getting on back to the moderate rebels, the ones that the government is telling you it's okay that we spend your tax money giving weapons and everything to. Well, and we've seen this happen before, but we're getting a report out of RINF.com. The moderate Syrian rebels are now joining with the al-Nusra Front. The moderates are taking their U.S.-supplied weapons and joining with what we are being told are the bad guys, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra. Russia-Syria's force has now grown to 4,000. And remember, Russia is there at the invitation of the legitimate Syrian government. The U.S. is not. There's a story that appeared over in All News Network where analysts are saying what the U.S. is really doing with this small number of special forces on the ground, that they're embedding with all the terrorist groups, is they're sacrificing them to try and provoke a war with Russia. In other words, Obama is using these special forces troops the way Roosevelt used the crew of the USS Arizona, set them up to be killed in order to say, oh, bad Japan, bad Russia, we must go to war. And if my heart goes out to the families of these special forces who are being set up to be killed to serve a political agenda. Now, as you know, yesterday, in fact, Barack Obama came on out trying to reconcile his putting these special forces on the ground in Syria with the some 15 times he promised there would be no boots on the ground in Syria. And we now know, going back to 2012, they've been planning to do it all along. Well, as soon as Obama said that, Twitter just exploded. Everybody is furious over the boots on the ground. Everybody is just enraged that Obama would come out and say this isn't boots on the ground and expect us to believe that. I'm not sure what Obama did. Maybe he's got all those special forces in Syria wearing ballet slippers or running shoes or thongs or something. But it's still our people on the ground in Syria apparently being set up as sacrificial targets to get the war with Russia going. Now, Russia has announced they are sending surface-to-air missile systems to Syria. And the story Russia is putting out is that fighter jets could be hijacked in neighboring countries and used to attack Russian forces, therefore we have to be able to shoot them down. Well, I'm sorry, Russia isn't fooling anybody. These missiles are being sent in response to the U.S. deployment of those F-15C area superiority fighters to the Turkish border and the giving of man-pad anti-aircraft missiles to the terrorists. France has decided they want in on the party. They're sending their aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, to fight ISIS. So everybody's just hopping on board. Oh, we're going to have a world war. It's going to be so much fun. Speaking of which, we've got a warplane out there turning and burning and making a lot of noise. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. F-15Cs, you got to be kidding me. I know they're like the hottest iteration of the 15, probably Israeli modifications involved with that too or something, but we're talking, that's a plane from the generation of the MiG-25 and the MiG-29.
Yeah, it's a 1970s vintage aircraft, and yes, the electronics have been upgraded, but it's not capable. And the reason they're sending these F-15s in there is they've got them ready to go, because they can't fix the problems with the follow-on aircraft. The F-22 still is asphyxiating its pilots, and they can't get the F-35 to actual deployable status. It can't be. It's not actually on active duty yet.
The only possible hope they could have is they might have some kind of electronics that might allow them to utilize some kind of standoff weaponry. But in close-in dogfighting, forget it. The Sukhois have, positioning nozzles in three axes. Even the Raptor only has nozzles in 2 axes. So, I mean, in terms of maneuverability, just forget it. It's got to be, they got to be relying on ECM and ECCM.
Well, we already know that the Russians are ahead of us in ECM. What may be going on here is our military doctrine is repeating the mistake in Vietnam, which is they sent in the F-4s. They said, our missiles will do all our fighting for us. We don't even need a cannon. And that's something a lot of people don't realize. The original F-4 Phantom jet did not have an onboard cannon. When the kill ratio started going down in dogfights, they added a belly pod that had a cannon. But the F-4 never had one. And it looks to me like they're going in with the same idea. The F-15s won't actually have to dogfight the Russian planes because our missiles will do the killing for us. And it seems like they can't learn from history.
Well, it's the first thing you learn in Top Gun. It's right at the top of the movie. It's the very first presentation in Top Gun.
Well, but they don't mention the fact that the reason the Navy kill ratio went down to 3-to-1 was that the F-4 pilots didn't have a cannon. When the missiles were gone, they were toast because the MiGs would turn on them and just, carve them up.
Right. There were a variety of other planes then too. But but the F-15, even the F-18, really, which is a more modern plane, still can't outmaneuver, these things.
No, they really can't. They really can't.
They have no dogfighting options at all. But
no, they don't.
One other point.
Well, all right, I'm going to have to hold you over the commercial break then. I'm going to have to hold you over the commercial break. Stay on the line. We'll be right back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to Glenn in Pennsylvania. You wanted to add something on the subject of air combat superiority.
No, actually, I actually wanted to hop over to the Russian passenger jet crash.
Okay.
There's another GCN host also setting historical examples of the Airbuses losing their tails and then going into an uncontrolled flat spin and tumbling and disintegrating midair.
They had a problem with those vertical stabilizers. I remember the composites were delaminating. They do happen. And here I want to be very, very clear. The official investigation may yet say there was some kind of a bomb or device on board. They're not saying it yet. The problem is that everybody who's out there screaming bomb, 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 terror, 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 ISIS, 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 it's all Putin's fault, do not have a factual basis for any of these statements.
Right. And if the plane disintegrated in midair and an engine or an electrical short ignited a cloud of atomized fuel, it could have been an explosion that had nothing to do with ordnance.
That's entirely true. I mean, once the plane comes apart, it's at that point in the flight plan, it would have still had about half the fuel load in the wing tanks. If that got dumped out and ignited by an exploding engine, you're going to have a heck of a blast outside the aircraft that would have holes and shrapnel and all the rest of everything else. But again, until they find the source of that, we don't know is really what it comes down to. And we're a clear propaganda campaign trying to sell us terror, ISIS, bad stuff. There has to be a reason behind it. I mean, it's the same thing when Flight 17 went down. There was a rush to say, it was shot down by the pro-Russian separatists, it was shot down by the Russians, it was this, it was that. And by the way, a lot of people are pointing out how quickly the official investigation into the Metrojet is coming out with the black box data and all this other information as compared to Flight 17, where it just dragged and dragged and dragged and dragged and dragged and dragged, and all the Western media kept saying is, take our word for it, it's all Putin's fault.
Right. And then, people will say, what kind of sick blankety-blank would want to take credit for killing innocent people? I can answer that with 3 words. Dresden, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki.
True. Or Hillary Clinton when she's talking about Gaddafi. We came, we saw, he died. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Interesting little story coming out of Sputnik News, and I want to preface it by going back to some of those initial videos that sold us all how bad ISIS was. Remember, ISIS came out of nowhere. In the space of a month, all of a sudden, they were the new Emmanuel Goldstein. Get ready for your 2-minute hate. And one of the videos they had showed them smashing these antiquities in a museum to erase the culture of the people, which is kind of what the U.S. is doing here with erasing the Confederate flag and everything. Then it came out that what had been smashed in that video were actually plaster copies and not the original artworks. Okay, now we're seeing this story where apparently ISIS is in fact looting antiquities from museums under their control and selling them to get additional money to fund what they're doing. And here's the interesting part in the story. All of these pirated antiquities are showing up here in the West. Now, the article doesn't comment on that, but it tells us, in point of fact, that the primary means of communication between ISIS and the outside world is through here in the West. They've already got the transit set up for weapons and supplies. The antiquities are coming back the other way. If ISIS were really Muslim jihadists, wouldn't these antiquities be showing up in the rich countries of the Middle East? But they aren't. They're showing up in Europe. They're showing up in the United States of America. Those are the lines of communication between ISIS and the outside world. Now, Russia and India have just signed a military technical cooperation agreement. This is another black eye for the United States and continues a pattern of nations that used to be sort of in the U.S. sphere of influence kind of backing away and saying, you know, Russia seems able to do a better job for less money than the United States. Now, here's something that's really getting kind of bizarre. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, who actually is over in the South China Sea at the moment. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But he basically came out and tried to assuage concerns over this huge shopping list that Israel has presented to the U.S. government for some $4.5 billion worth of weapons, including an aircraft carrier, as the U.S. apology for not killing the Iran P5+1 deal. And Ashton Carter said, well, really, it's a two-way street. Israel gives back to us as much as we give to them. Really, Ash? Show me. How? Israel does not provide the United States with billions of dollars every year for military hardware and other defense equipment. Israel takes our hardware, reverse engineers it, and then sells it to other countries, some who are not our friend. It is not a two-way street. It is one-way street and betrays the client-master relationship between Israel and the United States of America. And the fact that Washington, D.C. is, in fact, a Vichy government managing the United States at the request of, for the most part, and for the benefit of Israel. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I don't understand something. They're acting like if this was a terrorist act. I'm not sure if it was or wasn't, but they're like Putin would be blamed, like the Russian people. If anything, the Russians would really be angry, and they love. You know, the Russians have been through a heck of a lot more than this. I mean, look at what happened in World War II. Even then, when they had a communist government, now they got a country they're proud of, a leader they're proud of. So to say that, you know, they would blame Putin for this because he got involved in Syria, if anything is behind this, I would think it might be the Muslim Brotherhood, and they're allied with Obama, as a matter, and Saudi Arabia, of course. So, you know.
Well, there's one other possibility that we need to look at, and it's one I mentioned on when this first happened. Okay, because nobody seems to really be getting a good propaganda advantage from this aircraft crash happening where it did. And one possible theory, if we say yes, there was a bomb on board. Okay. It would have made more sense for this airplane to crash in the Mediterranean right off the coast of Syria, where it could be blamed on Damascus, and there wouldn't be a lot of evidence to recover. And I have to wonder if either the aircraft left its departure gate late, or there was a simple mistake on the timing or altitude detection device that set it off. Because if it was a deliberate bombing, where it came down doesn't seem to be the optimal place for it.
Yeah, but you got to understand something else. Muslim Brotherhood has it in for Egypt, too. You know, they don't exactly like General Sisi. So it could be they might think this is a twofer. Because if you remember after Sisi took the country back from, what was that guy's, Mohammed Morsi?
Yes.
But not only did Obama condemn Egypt at the time, but our good friends there, McCain, the Bopsy twins there, McCain and Graham went over and started saying, "Oh, you got to share power with the Muslim Brotherhood," blah 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 blah. So this would seem to me that, and remember the Sharm el Sheikh is right across from Saudi Arabia. That's what the strait is. Saudi Arabia is right there. So it wouldn't take much for a baggage handler or some to get a bomb on, or maybe a security employee or anything else.
Well, again, as it turns out, because so many Israelis vacation in this place, the airport has a lot of Israeli companies handling things like security. Just like the Shoe Bomber Airport, security was an Israeli company. The Crotch Bomber Airport was an Israeli security company. All of the airports from which the 9/11 planes departed had Israeli security. And so, yeah, it's entirely possible that somebody could get the bomb on there. Working for Mossad. I mean, more than likely. But again, where the plane came down doesn't seem to serve a really strong propaganda purpose. It may be that it just came down in the wrong location, that they'd planned for it to crash somewhere else. Again, we don't really know right now. The point I'm trying to make is that all of these people in the West who are out there saying, oh, it's a bomb, just trust us, it's ISIS, it's Al-Qaeda, they don't have a factual basis for any of it. It's a sales campaign. It's propaganda. And we need to figure out why.
And it seems to me like the Israelis, the Mossad, the Saudi government, and the Muslim Brotherhood are actually cooking out of the same kitchen these days.
Well, they're very closely allied. There's no question about that. But again, let's wait for the official investigation to actually say, yes, we found a bomb before we start looking at that line of it. Right now, my point is the rush to judgment, ISIS and terrorism, that in and of itself is something worthy of study. We got to take a break for our news. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Now, down in Israel, the Palestinian Permanent Observer to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, has filed a formal complaint against Israel, saying that as Israel shoots and kills Palestinians during the current round of violence, the bodies are being harvested for organs. And this is based on the fact that when the bodies are returned to the families, there are important, saleable pieces missing. And this has been backed up by medical examinations conducted on the bodies when they're returned. And, of course, Israel's representative at the United Nations is screaming this is all an anti-Semitic plot. It's all an anti-Semitic plot. It's inflammatory. It's not conducive to peace. It's all anti-Semitic. Blah, 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 blah. Want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens 4 times. The New York Times has decided to up the ante on the Let's All Help Israel propaganda by declaring that anti-Semitism is a mental disorder. Everybody get out the violins and start playing the sad music. David Brooks of the New York Times is saying that anti-Semitism is a mental disorder. Now remember, they're already declaring that criticism of Israel's government is anti-Semitism. They're trying to set the stage to literally say that anybody criticizing Israel's government is mentally ill. How very Soviet Union of them. Because that was a trick the former Soviet Union used to do to get rid of people pointing out where the government was misbehaving. Oh, they're mentally ill. You shouldn't listen to them. They're crazy. You're going to send them to a mental asylum and drug them up. They must really be getting desperate out there. And, of course, they're out there screaming at anybody who mentions the fact that not too long ago, Netanyahu made the claim that the Palestinians were responsible for the Holocaust, and he's retracted it. And now the spin coming from Israel supporters is, well, he took it back. You shouldn't ever mention it ever again. I'm going to mention it anytime Netanyahu or the Holocaust comes up. Now, Netanyahu has a brand new spokesman, the head of Israel's National Public Diplomacy Directorate, Dr. Ron Baretz, is now accusing Obama of anti-Semitism. Ooh, the American president is anti-Semitic. So apparently the latest definition of anti-Semitism is refusing to do what the government of Israel tells you to do. And here I thought it was hatred of Semitic people just because they were Semitic. That's what I thought anti-Semitism was. Oh, no, it's defying the government of Israel makes you an anti-Semite now. Okay, Doctors Without Borders has conducted their own investigation into the U.S. bombing of the hospital up in Afghanistan. U.S. is refusing to investigate any further than their declarative statement that we're the good guys and they're the bad guys, and is refusing to cooperate with an international investigation. Doctors Without Borders has conducted their own. This is what they have found so far. There were no armed combatants in the hospital. There was no fighting in the hospital. There was no fighting in the vicinity of the hospital at the time of the U.S. airstrikes with an AC-130 gunship. Doctors Without Borders is also reporting that the fire coming from the AC-130 was so intense, staff at the hospital were literally decapitated or delimbed. They were literally blown into pieces by the U.S. attack. The very obvious purpose of the attack was to kill and destroy. And if you look at the photos of the ruins of the hospital before the U.S. went in with a tank and knocked it all down to destroy the evidence, the place was shredded. This is a war crime by any reasonable definition of the word. Apparently, the United States wanted independent medical people out of Afghanistan, just in case Afghanis started showing up with symptoms of banned illegal weapons being used on them. Now, as I mentioned before, Ash Carter is over in the South China Sea. He is visiting the aircraft carrier that they have transiting the disputed South China Sea. And he's blaming China for all the rising tensions in the region. I mean, just think about that. The Secretary of Defense is on an aircraft carrier sailing through the waters, but China is the reason tensions are rising in the area. You see that kind of complete logical disconnect. And yes, China's going to be upset about it. And this almost seems to be a replay of the program of provocations carried out by Franklin Roosevelt in the year leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor. There was this Office of Naval Intelligence, Lieutenant Commander Arthur H. McCollum came up with an 8-step plan to goad Japan into attacking Pearl Harbor. And McCollum was very familiar with the Japanese culture, and he came up with 8 steps which to the American point of view would seem like very minor, trivial things. Oh, Ash Carter on a carrier out in the ocean, big deal, who cares? But to the Japanese or Chinese point of view, they were deadly insults. And they carried out the 8 steps, and after the 8th step, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt knew they were coming. The Japanese fleet was not maintaining radio silence, contrary to the myth, and their transmissions were being picked up not only by Station H, listening station up on Aiea, on the other side of Oahu. They were picked up by the SS Lurline, a passenger ship operated by the Matson Steamship Company. Their radio man, Leslie Grogan, was able to plot the position of the Japanese fleet as it was coming across the Pacific. The Lurline arrived in Pearl Harbor on December 4th, 1941, and Leslie Grogan gave his plot to the Navy at that point, and it has since vanished. But while Station H intercepted the communication, and it was decoded at Station Hypo down in Pearl Harbor and sent on to Washington, it was not shared with General Short or Admiral Kimmel, so that Roosevelt could say, oh, the dastardly Japanese, it was a sneak attack. We had no idea that this was going to happen. So forth and so on. Now, we have been talking about the American military establishment's myth that because we spend more money than anybody else on our weapons, we've got the best military in the world. We are absolutely undefeatable. And Russia has just demonstrated quite the opposite in Syria. And I've been pointing out all these costly boondoggles that the U.S. government wastes your tax dollars on, like the F-35, the F-22, Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Gerald Ford, carriers in general in this age of ship-killing missiles. And I'm not the only one who's thinking about this, because over at Sputnik News, they have an interview with the defense analyst Michael Peck, who is saying that Russia and China have weapons with capabilities the United States does not have, based on a study conducted by the RAND Corporation, which is a U.S. government think tank. They've been around for a very, very long time. And this is where the U.S. government goes to get accurate, unpolitically biased analysis of what's going on in the world. And they're saying that, no, we don't really have a qualitative or even quantitative edge after all the money we've spent. Because the American military-industrial complex runs weapons development as a money-making business, whereas Russia and China, their goal is effective weapons, and they got it, apparently. Meanwhile, the Veterans Administration has found a way to trim some of their losses. They're telling veterans that they're dead and cutting off the benefits. And apparently this is happening to a lot of people. Oh, our records show you're dead. We don't have to give you any more money. I'm not dead. I'm right here. Oh, you're not fooling anybody. You're dead. You're going to fall over any second here. We don't have to give you any more money. U.S. government's starting to sound more and more like Monty Python, if you think about it. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to talk about the economy just a little bit here. Deutsche Bank has been ordered to pay the United States over $250 million for violating the U.S. imposed sanctions. Now, again, this is putting U.S. hegemonic domination of Europe on full display for everybody to see. Where the U.S. says, we hate these people and you will hate them with us. Now, getting on to the campaign and elections, Donald Trump is apparently scheduled to host an upcoming episode of Saturday Night Live. And over at Fox News, Chef Smith is out there saying, you shouldn't be doing that. You can't do that. You can't give him the appearance of frothing at the mouth and everything. And it's hardly like Trump is the first political candidate to be on Saturday Night Live. But right now the push is to get Trump out and put somebody into the GOP nomination that Hillary Clinton can walk all over going into the White House. And they're not really doing all that well here. There's a very interesting commercial, a Trump ad, or an anti-Trump ad that came out. And we have it linked to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. And it's obviously not for broadcast TV, but because it includes profanities, and it's a bunch of little Hispanic kids cussing out Donald Trump. And it's not going to work. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, it's all these little kids going, F you, Donald, and, how dare you call me an anchor baby, and I'm here, and we were here first, and all this other stuff. And I don't think it's going to work, because I worked in advertising a lot of years, and I won a few awards during that time. This ad is going to have trouble gaining any traction, because the arrogance and profanity are going to prevent the audience from emotionally identifying with the children. They come across as children that you just want to slap across the face. And you certainly don't want them in your home. And if you're not identifying with the kids, you will not identify with their point of view. Moreover, this ad is clearly aimed at illegal immigrant voters, which is going to remind legal Americans the illegals are not supposed to vote in the first place, but are being allowed to do so. Frankly, this ad looks like it was designed by some high school kid. Now, there's an anti-Trump website that's out there that is encouraging people to go disrupt his rallies. They're literally offering a reward for anybody who will get into the Saturday Night Live taping and cause a ruckus. Now, the website looks like it was created by the Sanders campaign, but an examination of the source code indicates it's a product of Hillary Clinton's people. It's going to be a very, very dirty campaign this time. And it's going to be very visibly dirty, which is good. It's going to be an object lesson for people who are studying. Story coming out of Live Leak, the gig for Hillary may be coming to an end, and they're talking about how Jim Comey, the head of the FBI, is personally heading up the email investigation of Hillary Clinton, and they're looking at two issues. One is obstruction of justice. That carries a jail sentence. And the other one, the gross negligence handling of classified documents, which is what got Petraeus into trouble. However, I will believe it when I see it. Remember, the FBI covered up for the Clintons in the murder of Deputy White House Counsel Vincent Foster, faking their own report with the widow to claim that the dark blued steel revolver found with Vince Foster's body was the silver-colored gun Vince inherited from his father. And by the way, it's the FBI who described it as a silver-colored gun, not Lisa Foster. I have every expectation the FBI will cover for the Clintons again and declare that their investigation has found nothing wrong, both to maintain their proud tradition of Clinton cover-ups and to conceal the far greater scandal that Hillary may have used her weak server and the Clinton Foundation in a repeat of the Clintons' 1995 Chinagate secret spore donation scandal. I think it's a bluff. I think it's theater. The FBI and the Department of Justice, I'll be very pleasantly surprised if they do anything, but remember, they just cut Lois Lerner free. Get out of jail free card. Hillary Clinton is out there on the campaign trail pledging the unbreakable bond with Israel and with Benjamin Netanyahu. She's out there basically promising that she'll be an obedient little American president, unlike Barack Obama. She'll do whatever Israel wants so that Netanyahu's spokesman can't call her an anti-Semite. And it's embarrassing and humiliating to see our candidates grovel to Tel Aviv instead of us, the voters. Hillary Clinton is still out there pushing her anti-gun obsession, and possibly because of that, gun sales in October hit a record high for the 6th consecutive month. The more the gun grabbers scream, the more Americans realize this is serious and it's time to arm up. So, much for that one. Now, Hillary Clinton had a little embarrassing faux pas where she's out there talking about banning the requirement for disclosing your past prison experience on a job application. And she slips up and says, I will ban this so that former presidents won't have to declare their criminal history. And it's a simple little gaffe. It's no big deal here, maybe from the whack on the head that she suffered. What's really interesting is despite this obvious gaffe, the audience of trained circus seals surrounding Hillary all will applaud and bang wildly, oh, yes, it'll be great. Presidents won't have to declare their criminal history. That, to me, is far more revealing of Hillary Clinton's campaign than her malapropism. Brent Budowski is out there making the claim that Sanders is trouncing Trump and the media is refusing to see the very obvious. And everybody's out there cherry-picking their polls. The online polls are clearly showing Trump is still way much in the lead. But the corporate media and the Democratic Party machine are trying to replay Richard Nixon's re-election strategy of sabotaging any opponents who might actually be able to win, and leaving the opposition party with a nominee that their candidate can walk all over. In this case, they want to get rid of Trump because Hillary can't beat Trump in the general election. She can beat any of the other GOP people. She cannot beat Donald Trump. And apparently the GOP leadership is so afraid of Donald Trump, they are willing to lose the White House for the next 8 years just so they don't have a wild card, a president they can't control, they can't buy. Meanwhile, Ben Carson may have shot his own candidacy down. He's come out with a lot of really weird comments over the past. Now, some of the things he says I agree with. Global warming is a hoax, and the Big Bang is a fairy tale. On those 2 points, Carson and I agree. On the rest, not quite so much. And I got a real doozy for you when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, back in 1998, during a commencement address, Ben Carson made a statement to the effect that the pyramids in Egypt were not built by the Egyptians as tombs for the pharaohs, but they were built by Joseph, he of the coat of many colors, to store grain. Now, this shows a very serious disconnect from reality going on in Carson's mind. Certainly stands in sharp contrast to centuries of archaeological study of Egypt. And everybody was making a big head scratch about this. What's going on with this guy? He's lost his reality license. Somebody that disconnected from reality. should not be allowed in the Oval Office. And Carson's defenders immediately leapt forward and said, look, it was 1998, it was a long time ago. And then somebody put the question to Carson this week. And he confirmed, yes, he is absolutely convinced that all of the archaeologists and scholars are wrong. The pyramids were built by Joseph to store grain. They were not built by the Egyptians as tombs for the pharaohs. Okay? That's what he's actually saying. Now, the fact that the pyramids seem to be fitted out as tombs, have all kinds of religious hieroglyphs all over them, with prayers that the pharaoh will go to heaven, don't seem to influence his decision. I mean, he's basically... Can you imagine going out to Iowa, for example, and looking inside a corn silo, at the inside wall, if it's not covered by the corn, and finding a very elaborate prayer that the president will be allowed to go to heaven? That's basically how silly that whole idea is. And finally, the temperature on the inside of the pyramids is very constant because of all that rock. And it is the average temperature of the outside. It's a steady 68 degrees inside all the pyramids. It's fairly comfortable. There's only one problem. You can't store grain at that temperature or you will lose it. The ideal temperature for storing grain is below 40 degrees. Above that, you get insects and you get mold. And the corporate media is trying to tell us this guy is somehow beating Trump in their corporate media polls. He certainly isn't in the online polls. And I know the corporate media are supposed to be mindless government stooges, but these days they are really abusing the privilege. Apparently, investigators are looking back and discovering that Ben Carson has been sued for malpractice at least 8 times. A couple of days ago they were saying 6 times. They found 2 more. In one case, he performed a particular procedure without bothering to review the MRI on the patient, which would have said this procedure won't work. And that betrays a certain degree of recklessness, which is another trait we don't want in the Oval Office. And you know, this is what the GOP thinks they're going to put up in place of Donald Trump. I think they're going to switch over to Rubio and Cruz and try and push them forward, because Jeb Bush just is not going to go anywhere. He's down in single digits. But they're desperate to get rid of Trump, and it will cost the GOP the White House. That's how scared they are of having a president who isn't owned by the power structure. Now then, today, as you know, again, was Guy Fawkes Day, and there was a million mask march scheduled in many cities around the world. And apparently the police did a lockdown around Westminster out of concern that the celebrations for Guy Fawkes Day and the Million Mask March could descend into civil unrest, which is certainly a tremendous possibility. Because a lot of people are very unhappy with the British government. They're unhappy with the economy, they're unhappy with austerity, and they don't have to be wearing a Guy Fawkes mask to be upset with what's going on. Now then, getting on back to the economy here, there is an allegation coming on out that, this is from Trends Research Institute, Gerald Solende, reporting that the IMF is breaking its own rules in continuing to loan money to Ukraine, even though Ukraine is about to default on its $3 billion debt to Russia. And if the IMF starts breaking its own rules, the IMF's credibility is going to suffer tremendous damage. Not that it has a lot of credibility right now, but if it starts displaying an arbitrary set of behavior, one set of rules for Greece and another one set for Ukraine, more and more people are going to say this isn't any kind of an institution that's trying to serve the economy. It's just another bunch of money junkies finding any way they can to plunder the planet. By the way, I was looking at this story. I haven't posted it yet. Talking about literally a 180 square foot home in Palo Alto is being priced at $2 million. And we've all been hearing these stories about sky-high housing prices all over the place. And I think I'm figuring out what's going on, because there aren't a lot of people able to buy those homes. in this economy. I think these high-priced properties are being used as a cash sink to hide the effects of the inflation from all the QE and overprinting going on. They're creating all this new money. It's poured all over Wall Street. Wall Street is able to go out and buy these extraordinarily high-priced homes, and that way they're minimizing the visibility of the inflation effects. And I think that's the reason. Either that or they're doing another real estate bubble like they did before 2008, and when it pops, things will get ugly again, and once again they will turn to you, the generous and caring American people, to bail Wall Street out of its self-made mess, if you actually have anything that you can contribute. Story coming out of Russia today. The ruble will make Made in Russia a global brand. This is coming from a World Bank economist, saying that the ruble continues to rise. The devaluation of the ruble is opening up new possibilities for the Russian economy. Remember, for international trade, the less your currency is worth, the more favorable the trade is going to be. Now, it would be intuitive to say we want the most valuable currency in the world, but the reality is that shuts off exports on which a nation thrives. So, as the ruble gets adopted, Made in Russia is going to become the banner for manufactured products around the world here. Let's talk about immigration real quick. It is really increasing all over Europe despite the coming of winter. And they're already beginning to see the signs of a cold winter, and it's not deterring the immigrants at all. Remember, there is a 2 to 3 month backlog of immigrants still on their way to Europe from all these war zones. Apparently, there's been another 19-year-old girl in a German city gang raped, 4th gang rape this month alone. The people who are coming in with these refugees are not exactly setting a stellar example of why people should welcome them into their homes. We're now seeing cries from people in Germany calling on the German army to secure Germany's borders, contradicting the policy of Angela Merkel, and reminding them that the oath of the German military is to the country, not to the government. If the army opposes Merkel for her immigration policy, it's all over for her. Apparently tensions are so high, there was a confrontation in the German village of Freiburg. There was an announcement of the arrival of 384 new migrants. The population, the legal Germans, clashed with the police, tried to block the path, and were shouting, "Go ahead, shoot us." That's how desperate they're getting. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with more about immigration after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we are getting reports that the Million Mask March is underway in Trafalgar Square, and apparently there are acts of violence taking place. A police car has been set on fire. The BBC is reporting this as an anti-capitalist march. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is an anti-fascist march, because both in Great Britain and in the United States of America, we have stopped being a capitalist economy decades ago, and we have sunk into outright fascism. And the media is using anti-capitalists to try and demonize the protesters unfairly, because BBC serves the fascist dictatorship. Getting on back to the immigration problem, the European Union is acknowledging 800,000 irregular entries, that's the new euphemism for somebody sneaking across your border, in 2015. I would not be surprised if that number turned out to be considerably higher than that. They are predicting 3 million refugees will arrive in Europe by 2017, fleeing the war zones where the U.S. has been doing what the U.S. has been doing. Here in the United States of America, they are estimating the cost to you, the taxpayer, to resettle 35,000 Mideast refugees as $2.3 billion, with a B. That's 12 times what it would cost to provide for the same refugees where they came from. I'd like to see the U.S. government provide that kind of care and support to the American people first. There are reports that up in Sweden, in one of their migrant camps, they found a large cache of weapons. Remember, we were saying there's no security checks on these people. They're just pouring on in, and apparently some of them are bringing serious weapons. Now, over at the Occidental Observer, they have a comment, Orban, Europeans should throw away political correctness and shut down the migrant invasion. And yes, they should. We should throw away political correctness entirely. It's a joke. Political correctness is a system to get you to go along with things that you don't want to go along with, to believe in things you don't want to believe in, to use the language they tell you to use instead of your own, to basically, it's part of the process to erase your identity. It's not politically correct to be yourself any longer. You've got to be part of the common clay. Now, it gets even worse. Over in Ukraine, their Prime Minister Yatsenyuk is saying that this refugee crisis crushing Europe is all the fault of Vladimir Putin. It's all his fault. If he would just mind his own business and let us conquer the world, there wouldn't be a refugee crisis. Well, tell that to George Soros, who now admits funding the organizations that are encouraging and supporting the flood of migrants. By the way, if you live in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, or Metairie, I butchered that and I apologize to you people in Louisiana, there are refugees coming to your home soon. Now, over in Atlantic City, the Rebel Casino owner has suggested maybe they could use an old unused casino to house the refugees, because those casinos have been going out of business in this economy. As a temporary accommodation, yes. As a permanent solution, obviously not. Paul Craig Roberts has come out commenting on George Soros' support of the refugee flow and his comments about borders being an obstacle, saying that Soros' idea of European values means losing your sense of national identity. This is one more confirmation that this is the agenda behind the flooding of refugees and illegal immigrants into Europe and the United States, the attacks on the Confederate flag, the desecration of Confederate graves. It's to erase our sense of national and historical identity. So we're just one common herd of livestock to serve the new masters of the New World Order. They're trying to steal our past. And you know what's really ironic? When they were showing that video of ISIS destroying the phony antiquities in the museum, they said, how dare ISIS try and erase the cultural memory of these people? And yet that's exactly what they're trying to do here. I'll give you a good example of how out of control political correctness has gone. As you know, there is a new feature film coming out about the Peanuts comic strip, Charlie Brown and his friends. And Variety magazine's international film critic, Peter DeBruge, came on out and said, Charlie Brown and his gang are a bunch of racist homophobes, saying that Charlie Brown, instead of his longtime traditional flame Peppermint Patty, ought to be dating a girl of color. Really, that would be politically correct. Now we're supposed to form relationships on the quota system. Completely out of control here. Apparently over in a Florida middle school, a 14-year-old girl was sentenced to detention for the crime of hugging another student. Ella, an 8th grade student at Jackson Heights Middle School, says one of her male friends was having a real bad day. She gave him a quick hug for a second, and she was sent to detention. How dare you touch a man? Go ahead and touch the girls. That's cool. Cincinnati, Ohio, a first grader was suspended from school for pretending to be a Power Ranger during recess and pretending to have a bow and arrow. Suspended the 6-year-old student for 3 days. What are they doing to our children? Like I said, erasing their cultural heritage, their memories, their history, their identity. They're moving too fast. It's calling attention to itself. But they're feeling if they can't pull it off in the next year or two, it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen anyway. Everywhere the illegal immigrants are going in, hostility is rising, nationalism is rising. And I don't care how much they scream that a sense of a national identity is politically incorrect. I'm not listening to the PC people anymore, because they're stupid. Now, you've probably heard on the corporate media how this police officer who was reported shot dead by criminals and sparked this huge manhunt turned out to have been a carefully staged suicide because he was secretly embezzling money from youth programs in order to visit adult websites. And there's another bizarre story. This is over in Blacklisted News. The police are now stealing property out of unlocked cars to protect you from people who might steal your stuff. They say they're doing it to teach people a lesson about locking their cars. But if you go back to your car and something is missing, it may have been taken by a police officer. And you may not get it back anyway if you can't find out who actually did it. We're at the stage in our government's history where they're surviving by plundering the people. I forget how many years ago it was we came up with that coffee cup we have in our store. The last official act of any government is to loot the nation, and that's where we are right now. Latest security analysis for TSA is showing that the TSA airport screener's ability to actually detect weapons is pitiful. They are pitiful at actually finding weapons. They're great at stealing things out of your luggage, groping your crotches, giving you skin cancer, humiliating you, destroying tourism, but apparently they're not really very good at actually finding people who are carrying weapons on the airplanes. Rupert Murdoch has now taken over the National Geographic, and despite promises to the contrary, is laying off the award-winning staff and bringing in his own people. So it's going to become another Rupert Murdoch rag. I guess the good news is Murdoch is going to probably bring back the pictures of naked native girls that National Geographic used to be famous for, and then they were taken out for political correctness. And I'm sure Roop is going to put those back in as well. Okay, we're coming up here on our top of the hour news break. When we come on back from the news, we're going to be talking with Yusuf Rashid. He's trying to crowdfund a GMO-free chain of stores or restaurants. There is certainly a market need for it, a market desire. Of course, it pits him against the GMO giants like Monsanto and Syngenta, who are known to play tough. So we'll be talking with Yusuf after the news and a couple of commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Joining us on the phone now is Yusuf Rashid. And Yusuf, I noticed that he is trying to crowdfund a new project to address the very obvious market need, market demand for GMO-free food. So, Yusuf, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, tell us about your project. What are you trying to do?
Okay, well, would it be okay if I gave you like a little backstory first, or should I just get right into the project?
Please give us the backstory.
Okay, so the backstory is I was born in 1985. I've always been sick as a child. I was always getting nauseous. I was always throwing up. I used to drink a lot of milk. I was obsessed with drinking milk as a little kid. When I got older, I started getting a lot of skin problems. I used to get cystic acne. I used to get psoriasis on my head. I tried everything in the world. I would go into the vitamin shop, and every single vitamin I could find, I would buy it. It didn't work. I would go to this website called Mountain Rose Herbs. I would buy every herb that they said, oh, this will do this, this will purify your blood, this will give you more energy, because I was always lethargic. I was always sick, and none of this stuff would work. And after a while, I do some more research online, and they were saying, oh, well, you're probably allergic to something. You might be allergic to milk. You might be allergic to this. So do this diet where you stop eating some things for a few days, and then you add it back into your diet, and you record it in a journal, and you see if it affects you. And strangely enough, the things that were affecting me the most were dairy and were wheat products, and pretty much all this like cake and junk food and all that junk that I would eat, that was really causing all my issues. So I thought to myself, wow, like I have to stop eating bread. I have to stop eating dairy. I have to stop eating all these foods that I really love, but that's the only thing that's going to make me feel better. So that's what I did, and I was doing that for a couple of years. So one day I come across this forum, And this woman, she went to Italy, and she said that she's allergic to gluten. And in this forum, she said she didn't care if she was going to get sick or not, that she was in Italy and she just wanted to enjoy the food, and she was fully expecting to get sick. And she ate the bread in Italy, and she didn't get sick. To her surprise, she didn't get sick. I mean, it was something that I always kept in the back of my mind. It wasn't like I was going to take a plane and fly out to Italy and start eating everything to, test it out, but it was always something I kept in the back of my mind. Now, in January, I took a trip to Turkey, and I went with my university, and I couldn't eat the way I was eating back in New York. I had to, pretty much start eating all the normal food over there, and little by little, I started eating things that I couldn't eat back in New York. So I would have a little bit of bread, I would test it out, and then the next day I'd have a little bit more bread, and I started realizing I'm not getting sick. What's going on? Then I started eating cake, I started drinking milk, I started eating cereal. I'm like, what's going on? I'm not getting sick. This stuff makes me so sick back in New York. So I had read about GMOs, I had read about organic and not organic and all that sort of stuff, and I always tried to stay organic and all these things, but I was still getting sick back in New York. So when I come back to New York, I'm like, you know what it is? The bread in Turkey, I can eat it. In Europe, where they're not putting all these GMOs, it turns out America's food is over 60% genetically modified. So I start going to Whole Foods, and I'm sorry, did you say that?
I just said, wow, 60%.
Yeah, so I went to Whole Foods. There was a Whole Foods that opened up near me in Jericho, New York, and they're selling organic bread. And I said, wow, well, this is great. At least I could start eating organic bread back in New York. So I started eating that USDA certified organic bread. And within half hour of eating that bread, my entire body starts itching. Within a few days, the skin on the side of my nose starts peeling. It's like I'm getting psoriasis on the side of my nose or eczema. So I don't know where they're pulling this organic bread from, because it's clearly not organic. They're lying, or whatever they're doing, because they charge the prices over there are through the roof. So then I started doing the research, and like I said, over 60% of American food is GMO. In Europe, I read the recent article that now they're going to ban countries from opting out of GMOs. I read that on your website, which is so depressing, so incredibly depressing. But I started realizing that we need this non-genetically modified. There's no place to go. And even when you go to Whole Foods, a lot of these things are live. And I live on Long Island in New York. There's farmland out east. And there's people who say that they're selling grass-fed cows that serve, they're selling their milk, they're selling their butter, but it's so extremely expensive. You have to drive all the way to the end of Long Island to get it. So I started thinking, we need food back in America that's not genetically modified. How many illnesses, how many sicknesses do people have in this country, and they don't know why they have it, and it's because of the food we're eating, and the pesticides they're spraying on it, and all these, who gives them the right to go in there and change the DNA of food and then force it down our throats? When it's untested, they did a test in France where they were giving rats genetically modified food, and they're growing tumors all over the place. And so many people in Europe are against this TPP because they're saying it's going to allow genetically modified food from the United States to get into Europe. So it's so incredibly depressing that I came to the realization that living in America, where I was born and raised, I can't even eat the food. I have to go to another country to eat food just so that I don't get sick. So I want to start a restaurant that gives this stuff easily to people, that makes it accessible. I was literally thinking about moving to Turkey for some time, because I was saying I can't even enjoy food over here. I can't eat the kind of things that I can in Europe that I can eat in the United States, and it's so incredibly frustrating and depressing. So basically, that's how I got to the idea that I want to build a non-GMO organic restaurant, and I don't trust what the U.S. government says that it's organic or that it's non-GMO. I want a farm where, it's like, sorry to quote Donald Trump, but he keeps saying all these politicians, they can't do it, so he wants to go out and do it. I want to go out and do it. I want to be in charge of it. I want to make sure that the cows are grass-fed, the ones that are giving the milk, the ones that are, when you make cheese. I want to make sure that the bread, the seeds are grown from, non-GMO seeds. So that's why I started this GoFundMe account, because I was hoping that there would be at least 5 million people in America who want healthy food back in America, and who would be at least willing to contribute $1 so that something can get started, because Monsanto has too much of a stronghold over our country, and it's not good for us. We're the most obese country. We're the most chronically. Mike Huckabee said it the other night on the Republican debate on CNBC that there's so much chronic illness in this country. Why? Isn't America the most developed, the most advanced country in the world? Why are we so sick? Why are we so obese? Why do we have these problems? It's the food. And if you go to Europe, they're not saying, oh, don't eat cake, don't do this. People are enjoying all the foods that we can't enjoy. We're on a new diet every single week that's telling us, don't eat this food, don't eat that food. Why not? Once I went to Europe, I realized we should be enjoying all the food. They're the ones. And
we could if it wasn't being tampered with. Yusuf, I got to take a break here. 4 minutes for commercials, and we'll be right back. We'll be right back with Yusuf Rashid after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Yusuf Rashid, who is trying to use GoFundMe to fund a totally non-GMO organic restaurant where people who are sensitive to all these chemicals and everything can go and have a meal that they know is going to be absolutely safe. Before I hand the microphone back to Yusuf, quick comment on the USDA certified organic. You've seen it on products in the store. When that was originally established, it really was organic. But over time, industry lobbyists have basically prevailed on the U.S. Department of Agriculture to relax the rules a little bit. And now products that are bearing that label, USDA certified organic, what it means today is it's mostly organic. But they allow a certain amount of chemical additives and a certain amount of GMO content, and they're still allowed to claim it is certified 100% organic. It's politics, it's money. And the goal here appears to have been to use GMO and Monsanto's technology to commandeer hegemonic domination of world food production, to basically control the world through food the way the Federal Reserve was trying to control the world through the U.S. dollar. And yeah, there are a lot of horrible side effects that are coming up. Yusuf was talking about this French study that went far longer than Monsanto's original study with the rats to declare it all safe and found all kinds of problems. There are now more than 40 peer-reviewed journal articles showing that there are serious health consequences from consuming GMO food or the glyphosate pesticide. But the goal is conquest of the world, and like any other war mindset, civilian casualties are just something that is part of the cost of doing business. So I have just reposted the link to Yusuf's GoFundMe page to the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. And for those of you who are not looking at the website, might want to grab a pencil. It's GoFundMe.com, no to GMO. The 2 is a numeral. So it's GoFundMe.com, N-O, numeral 2, GMO. So, Yusuf, tell us about how you exactly plan to carry this out.
Yeah, Michael, I just wanted to say, GoFundMe.com /NO, the numeral 2 GMO. It's got the / in there. So basically there's farmland out on Long Island. I want to open up a restaurant. I want to bring seeds from Europe that use, the original seeds that haven't been touched by Syngenta and haven't been touched by Monsanto. Use those seeds to plant wheat, those seeds to plant fruits. I want to use that food from my farm. I want to have grass-fed cows. I want milk from the grass-fed cows used at my restaurant. Basically, I want to start something that is because we don't really have anything that's a counter to Monsanto in this country. I want to start a movement, and we need to start somewhere. And I think if people realize the benefits of eating, a lot of people think they're allergic to bread, and they don't realize that, no, they're just allergic to the chemicals that they're spraying on the bread here, or the way that the bread is genetically modified. They're okay. They can eat bread, and they should eat bread, and we should be enjoying all the foods that are, on this earth. We should be enjoying them. So that's exactly how I want to do it, by attaining a farm, by, attaining a restaurant. So it's costly, but like I said, I think if 5 million people donated $1, I mean, things could really start moving, and we could really get somewhere. And I want other people to do this in other states. I want the whole country to revolt against Monsanto, because they have no right to be doing what they're doing to our food.
Well, they have no right to demand that we eat their product, and they have no right to demand that we not be told what's in the food that we eat. I mean, if you talk about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to life includes the right to decide what fuels that life, what kind of food that you have. And I think it is definitely a sign of the dictatorship that we are seeing the government take the position that we don't need to know what we're putting in our mouth, even if it is potentially causing harm. And now we've had this revelation that the USDA has known for decades that glyphosate was a carcinogen, but it's all driven by money and politics and the desire to literally have control over global food production to maintain the U.S. position of global dominance. But it's having all of these unexpected side effects. I mean, I applaud you trying to create your own supply chain. We know that GMO pollen is a real threat. It's contaminating non-GMO crops with wild, reckless abandon, and that appears to have actually been part of Monsanto's plan all along, that eventually there won't be any plants left on the world that are GMO-free, and the whole world will basically owe licensing fees to Monsanto, even if they never actually wanted their product in the first place. It is a dastardly plan, to put it simply, and I'm glad people are starting to stand up to it. And again, Monsanto will not serve GMO food in their own company cafeteria. That's what's really revelatory about what's going on here.
Yeah, I even heard that in the White House, that if you go to the White House, their food is all organic and non-GMO.
Yes.
I don't know if that's true or not.
I've heard that as well. But again, there's the food for the rich and the powerful elites is really good, and everybody else is eating Soylent Green.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think we as a country need to wake up to this, because when 66% of our food is GMO and growing, I mean, they don't care about us. They don't care about our health. And you know what? It's more of a good business when we get sick, because then we go to the doctor.
That's exactly
and then the
right.
Pharmaceutical companies can pump us full of pills.
You're exactly right. I think the Michelle Obama school lunch program is training the kids to just accept nothing but processed factory laboratory-produced food for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible. It's really sad. We always think about the future and how wonderful it'll be and all the technologies that are going to exist. But look, this technology that they're creating is destroying us from within. And so many people don't even know it. So many people are sick and they don't even know it. And I would like people, if they could also to share that link. There's a share option on No to GMO on the GoFundMe website, and just get the word out. And you know what? Start your own restaurant. Start your own protests and action against companies like Monsanto, and take back our food rights and our freedom to eat what we want to eat.
I absolutely agree. We've got about 45 seconds left, and one more time, the GoFundMe page is linked to the front of WhatReallyHappened.com, and the address is GoFundMe.com/NO2 GMO, and we do need a lot more of this, because I can't think of any more obvious sign of dictatorship than the dictatorship telling you what you're going to eat, what you're not going to eat, what medicines you must take, what medicines you can't take. That's absolutely, we're not a free society when we can't decide that we have a right to eat healthy, untainted food. Absolutely. Yusuf, thank you very much. I hope that this appearance will generate some interest in your website. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to go right to the phones and grab ourselves a phone call from Damien in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, good to talk to you. That was great, and you can definitely tell how passionate Joseph is from the way he's talking about it, and we really should all have that kind of passion because it is our food, and we should be just as passionate about it. It's
not just our food, it's our health. I mean,
water and our health, exactly.
He's hit an absolute issue for being supposedly this great advanced technological nation. The Americans are just chronically ill all the time, and of course their only solution is to sell us another pill or another ointment. And I don't think technologies in and of themselves are bad or good. They're neutral. It's the purposes they are put to. And in this case, we have money junkies that are taking the work of scientists and turning it into something that is profitable and very recklessly.
Yep. Yeah, well, we all know that the pharmaceutical companies, I mean, many of the drugs that they come out with do come from synthesized things that they get from nature. They go to various places in the world and they find different things and they use them to treat things, cancer, all those kinds of things. And a lot of the other things are they're just treating symptoms. They're not actually treating the illness themselves.
Oh, they don't want a cure. Cures are bad business. Constant treatments, that's where the profits are.
Exactly. I've been eating mostly organic since I was about 19 when I was studying food and doing all kinds of stuff myself, and then I turned to 100% organic for the past 4 years, something like that. And I've worked on several organic farms, and I've done a bunch of my own personal farming and stuff as well. And if Joseph is still listening, I'm right there with his line of reasoning. What you were talking about was very important. One of the farms that I worked at, we had a big problem with one of the neighboring farms, which was a mile and change away, with the pollen coming over to the GMO pollen coming over, and even, who knows, it could have been from the bird species or something. And we did have a couple of areas where we had to address that, and it is a very important thing. So if he's looking for land, hopefully he's keeping it as far as
he's going to have everything inside greenhouses. That's the only way to really guard against that contamination.
That's what we ended up doing was hoop houses, yeah. I just really quickly, I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you've got plenty of things to get onto. For people looking at organic foods and purchasing organic foods, if you look on the label and you see soy or wheat or corn and it does not say non-GMO, or if that bag does not have the certified non-GMO project label on it, that is going to most likely have GMO in it. So I would tell you, if you like that product, call that company, email them, write them, whatever you want to do, and tell them, I really like your product, but I'm avoiding GMOs, but you have this one item in there. Can you either change it to non-GMO or can you be GMO certified? What can you do to change this? If everybody does that, it will bring things into much more alignment, and they'll see that the market is going in that direction for a reason. We're doing it for a reason, not just because we're spending our money and we want to spend it wisely, but because we want to be healthy. But if everybody does things like that, it does take things to the next level.
Well, there's a little bit of a wrinkle on that, and it's called the law of supply and demand. There is no question that there is a huge demand for safe, healthy food for everybody to be eating, but there isn't a sufficient supply. We're already in a situation where stores that are carrying GMO-free organic food are having to import it from outside the United States of America. And the industry response has been to lobby for laws to prohibit GMO labeling, and after they get that one, I can guarantee you they're going to come out with a law saying that you can't label your food as being GMO-free because it's restraint of trade. I mean, we're literally getting into this ultimate fascist dictatorship where the corporations are deciding all the laws, and they are going to write the laws to keep the money flowing to them. New Zealand released the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was supposed to be kept secret for 5 years. New Zealand went and published it. People are reading it already. It is an absolute giveaway of our sovereignty and freedoms to corporate interests.
Yeah. A lot of some of the organic farms that supply places like Whole Foods and that sort of thing, where you get organic spinach and it's prepackaged, pre-washed, and all that. A lot of it's coming from California. When they had a problem, with the drought before they were trying to figure out how to do that, they could not supply the stores. So a lot of it too is where these organic farms are located or where they're centralized. And again, this goes back to the buying local. If you're going local organic, that's really a great way to go. And right in line with what Yosef is talking about.
Well, we're very lucky here. We have a lot of small farmers on the island, and we have these flea markets down right at the bottom of the hill, Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday, and the produce people are there, and we buy all of our produce from them.
Yeah, we have that in New York too. Fortunately, and it's a lot more widespread than it was before. Michael, thanks for everything you do. Great. Thanks for talking to you. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines for today because I got a bunch of stuff that I need to get to. Human-caused global warming, as we mentioned earlier, this best known, most famous weatherman in all of France was kicked off of his weather program, and now he has been fired for writing a book on his own time, at home, outside his TV job, calling into question the validity of claims of human-caused global warming. And we're already seeing that France, which made a big holler about freedom of expression regarding Charlie Hebdo's drawings that insulted Islam and the Catholics, they're proving to be a nation that doesn't value or respect freedom of speech at all. And they fired this weatherman for challenging the orthodoxy of human-caused global warming. They're imprisoning people for supporting the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. France is turning into a real tyrannical dictatorship. Now, over in Russia, Putin is telling Obama to take his global warming and shove it up his Rockefeller, as well he should. Because it is. It's a gigantic hoax. It's one of only two things I agree with Ben Carson on. It is a fraud. Somebody did a poll over in China and it showed that concern about global warming is plummeting over there. There are similar polls showing the same thing here in the U.S. People are just not convinced about global warming. We've got more important things to think about, like the potential for World War III. And Obama's out there saying that, fighting global warming is a higher priority for him than Putin's challenge in Syria. I mean, it's nonsense. Meanwhile, of course, we are starting to get into our winter snow season. It's snowing near Flagstaff, 4 inches of snow on parts of southern Utah. It's still the late fall. We're not officially into winter yet. Now, interestingly enough, looking at the historical records for Death Valley, we find that the world record for the highest air temperature ever measured of 134 degrees was recorded in Death Valley on July 10th, 1913. Just before World War I was the world record high temperature. Another story coming out of Investment Watch Block. Current CO2 levels in the atmosphere are the same as they were back in 1910. And don't forget, last summer, actually summer of 2014, was the summer that Al Gore said the Arctic would be completely ice-free, and NASA only recently had to admit, in point of fact, that the ice caps are growing. They're not melting away. So, anyway. Another editorial, this is coming out of ReviewJournal.com, chastising NOAA for its flat-out refusal to provide documents to Congress backing up NOAA's claim that there has been no pause to global warming, that temperatures continue to increase smoothly, and it's all the fault of humans. They refuse to turn over the documents supporting their assertion, citing that the right to privacy of scientific inquiry. Well, NOAA is a public institution funded by tax dollars. We're not talking military secrets here. They don't have a right to refuse that information. They're doing it because they got caught in another lie. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Final note on the subject of human-caused global warming. As you know, later this month, there's going to be this summit in Paris to deal with the crisis of human-caused global warming. And the agenda is very simple: to impose a global system of carbon taxation with which to raise more money for desperately broke and in-debt governments. But more than that, it's a new system of hegemonic control over the world, by exerting control over those nations who have carbon resources, natural gas and oil, and dictating to them how much and when they can sell it. That's what it's really all about. It's one of the foundations of the global government. They've got 3 pillars underlying the push for the New World Order. The first is human-caused global warming, which we know is a hoax. The second is the need for a global health authority, which was being pushed back in 2009 during the not quite a pandemic, even though it was called one, when pigs fly flu. That one fizzled. Huge embarrassment about that one. And the third one is a global financial authority to deal, with managing the world's economy following a major crash. That one seems to be on the verge of happening. But it's all about global government. And global government is not for the benefit of the globe. It's for the benefit of the government. It's all being done so that a small, select group of people can stand on the top of golden temples built to their own everlasting glory and proclaim, I'm the king of the world. That's what it's really all about. And we can see already it will not be benevolent government, because they'll go on doing what they're doing now. You will buy our cheaply made, possibly toxic food, and you will eat it and you will like it. You will let us spy on you all the time. We're talking about a new world order that is establishing itself through fraud and deception. And absolutely, freedom of speech will not be allowed, or it will not survive its own creation. So the New World Order, I guarantee you, will be history's most tyrannical dictatorship ever. I hope that meeting in Paris gets hit with a blizzard. I really, really do. That won't change their mind, but it would be funny to laugh at. Alrighty, we're getting up close to the top of the show here. Let me skip on down here since we were on the topic of GMOs and everything. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has been accused of suppressing research linking pesticide to widespread bee deaths. Jonathan Lundgren, a senior research entomologist at the USDA, made the accusation as part of his whistleblower case, claiming the USDA retaliated against him after he linked pesticides to colony collapse disorder, because it was a threat to the companies that produce it, including Syngenta and Bayer AG. You remember Bayer? That's the company that sold hemophilia medicine tainted with the HIV virus to the third world. Story coming out of RIF.com. Strong links between glyphosate and a multitude of cancers are reaching epidemic proportions. There's been a new survey out there at all the peer-reviewed reports coming out about health consequences of exposure to glyphosate, which is the key ingredient in Roundup. The World Health Organization has classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. That's just one step below known carcinogen. And they've known this all along. But if it makes money, we're going to sell it to you. And if you get sick, well then, by golly, we'll just refer you over to the medical industrial complex and they'll get your money. Now, over at Illinois, their Environmental Protection Agency has waded into the issue of disposal of your Halloween jack-o'-lanterns. That the disposal must be proper and must be managed to protect human health. So they put out a list of things you must do, rules you must obey to get rid of those old used-up jack-o'-lanterns. I remember when I was a kid, we just toss them on the compost pile. Use them as fertilizer for the farm next year. Nobody got sick. Nobody had any problems. Now, apparently, the government was trying to raid a raw milk farm in Ontario, Canada, run by Michael Schmidt. And they just went on in there and said, just because people want raw milk that's not processed in chemical additive doesn't mean they can have it. But the Facebook post went out, and apparently 50 neighbors of Schmidt showed up and blocked the path of the officials and stopped the raid, ordered them to put the machinery back in place. This is the new version of the Minutemen. Remember in colonial America, the Minutemen, don't wait for orders, just grab your musket, ride for the sounds of gunfire. We have new Minutemen linked on the internet to intercede against government abuse. Let's back up here a little bit, talk a little bit about computers before the end of the show. The new British surveillance bill, despite claims to the contrary, will in fact store everybody's internet records for an entire year. all of your requests, all of your browsing, all of it will be stored for an entire year. Guess who gets to pay for the added storage? And apparently the police will be able to see the names of sites you have visited without any warrant. They can go on a fishing expedition. And of course, this is all being claimed that this is needed to fight crime and terror, and of course that's nonsense. Real criminals and terrorists have long ago abandoned the open internet. They have their own private lines of communication, or they've developed their own encryption which governments cannot break, which we proved is easy to do. All of these spy laws are the embodiment of George Orwell's totalitarian state, constant surveillance of the people by government that has grown terrified of the population because the population no longer trusts them, believes them, does as they're told. United Nations appointed Special Rapporteur on Privacy, Joseph Kanatati, is saying that right now surveillance in the UK is worse than what was described in the book 1984. We've gone past George Orwell. Little picture that's out on the internet. George Orwell's house, there's a plaque on it that says House of George Orwell, and in front of it is a pole with government TV surveillance cameras. Little bit of an irony there. A lot of people more and more concerned about Windows 10, this intent to force us onto it, even if it breaks our older applications and costs us money. There's a story coming out of ZDNet saying that Windows 10 needs a data collection off switch following the revelation from Microsoft that it can't be turned off. And frankly, even if Microsoft includes an off switch as part of a later update, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't trust it. Microsoft is totally hand in glove with the NSA. They want to know everything that you're doing to make sure you're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. Rejection of Windows 10 has become so bad that PC support reps from companies that are selling Windows 10 computers are now helping their customers downgrade the operating system back to Windows 8.1. Some of these computers, the BIOS is written to prevent you from installing an alternative operating system, whether it's an older version of Windows or Linux. You will, by golly, use the operating system we have designed for you, to keep an eye on you, to use your resources, which, by the way, is a violation of the Fifth Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Not the part about self-incrimination, but the part that follows it. The government cannot use your property without just compensation. They're using your computer without compensation to spy on you. They're using your bandwidth without compensation to send that data to a collection center. Story coming out from Journal Neo denouncing all the propaganda about Chinese hackers, saying in the wake of all Snowden's revelations about NSA, CIA, DIA, Pentagon, the rush to blame China is nonsense. We need to look much closer to home. I'm totally in agreement with that one. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, eat healthy, share what you know with who you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.